Today I'm going to show you how to make animal fur that looks soft with my secret way to paint a wool texture. We're going to be painting these sheep in watercolour, but in a quite unusual way. We're going to mix the colours on the paper rather than in the palette. So we start off by wetting the body of the sheep, the fleece as it's called, and then I'm going in with a perhaps surprise colour of a bright orange, a vermilion. Any bright orange or orangey red will do. And that's wet paint onto the wet surface of the paper. So wet in wet, and it stays nice and fluid as you can see here. Now, next thing to do is put the dark colour in, and this is a Payne's Grey. And I'm going to paint it along the bottom of the fleece and then around the head and the face. Okay, now I've cleaned my brush, I've dried it off and dampened it, and I'm using the damp brush, the clean damp brush, in a kind of swirling motion, pulling the dark colour into the bright orange, cover the whole of the fleece. We don't want any little bits of orange left behind, and we get a kind of a brown colour, in lots of different variations, slightly random. If we'd have mixed it in the palette, we'd have had a brown, which when we'd applied, would be very flat. So for the middle sheep, I'm doing exactly the same. I'm starting off with the orange colour, and then I'm adding a blue, which is indigo, and I'm doing the same again. I'm painting along the bottom, around the head, and then with a damp brush, I am swirling them together. Next, I'm using a clean damp brush just to lift off a few highlights, mostly along the top of the fleece, or on the flanks and the rump. And then splashing some water on using my brush, hold the brush over the painting and tap it. And if you can't manage that, because some people can't, just tap onto your finger or another brush. Next, the fleeces are still wet, and I am using a damp brush to drag some of the pigment down onto the legs. So the sheep have a dark woolly fleece and light legs and a light coloured head. So yeah, pull some of the pigment down from your fleece, let it flow down into the legs. And then you can add a suggestion of a knee with a grey colour. You can mix that with the blue and the orange. And then finally, if you lift a little bit off from the foot away from the hoof to make it white, back almost to the white of the paper. So all that's done while the fleeces are still wet, so you have to be fairly quick there. Now we leave all that to dry, and then we come back to it, and it looks like this, and you can see that the colours are browns and greys. Now you might be thinking, why is he painting brown sheep? Grey sheep, surely they should be white. Well, these are Herdwick sheep, which are native to the Lake District of England where I live, and they were actually brought over by the Vikings in the 9th and 10th century, we think. They're a very hardy species, obviously, if they're from Scandinavian climes. And it means that they survive well in the harsh conditions that we can get on the fells or the hills in the winter months, or even the summer months for that matter sometimes. And these Herdwick sheep have, they actually start off completely black. The lambs are completely black face, black legs, black fleece, and then as they get to about a year old, they lighten, they become brown with lighter heads, and then eventually, as they get older, they get grey fleeces. So that's why we've got two with brown and one with the grey fleece. The faces, I wetted the top half of the face, not the snout, and I dropped in a very light grey, and then it's still wet. So wet into wet, I'm dropping a little bit more of the grey in, and I painted on the ears too. Now, slightly out of focus, but this is a wet rigger brush loaded up with some Payne's Grey, and I'm painting the nose and the mouth. And they do actually look like that. If you Google Herdwick sheep, they do have these little smiley faces. They're quite famous in the Lake District of England. There's even a brand that started selling little smiley sheep figurines and T-shirts and mugs and goodness knows what else. Anyway, back to the painting. Yeah, so now I'm painting some grass, and I'm doing exactly the same again. I'm painting a slightly unusual colour, yellow, for the grass, and then I am dropping in, wet into wet, so dropping in some Payne's Grey again. And when you mix Payne's Grey and yellow together, you get a green. It's quite an olive green, as you can see. But with my clean damp brush, I'm mixing the two together. I'm trying to keep it dark under the hooves. And then there I am just trying to flick up some of the pigment using the side and the tip of the brush to give a suggestion of some strands of grass. It's probably a little bit too wet for me to do that, but with a light touch you can just about get away with it. You could, of course, wait for it to dry and then do it with a dry brush. Now I'm going back into the face because I thought it was dry, but it wasn't. I was trying to paint on the eye detail there. Never mind, let's just dab that out with a clean tissue. And while I was waiting for it to fully dry, I put on an extra wash of brown and grey on two of the fleeces because I thought the texture was a bit wild. Here's what to do when the face is completely dry. Just paint in the suggestion of an eye with a rigger brush. It's kind of like a number 6. And I'm strengthening up the ear where I blotted out there, and all of them, in fact, where I thought it needed a little bit of contrast between the ear and the head. And then I'm reinforcing some of the dark under the sheep on this right hand side. And that's how you mix on the paper to get a slightly more random, slightly more varied, maybe even slightly more interesting mixture of colour. And if you'd like to see mixing colours on the page in a landscape setting in an even more random fashion, you should check out this video.